to the Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Glenn M. Calaguas, to all my panelists and former professors, Professor Angelina P. Lumanlan, Dr. Divine C. Ladrillo, Dr. Elmer P. Calaguas, Dr. Gerald M. Salas, Professor Danica N. Marcelo, and Ma'am Joy Basa. To our Graduate School Secretary, Ma'am Alma R. Miranda, our Graduate School Coordinator, Ma'am Leslie S. Valerio Torres, and to my advisor, Professor Dexter Andrew O. Manalo, a pleasant day to everyone. I'm Ken from the program of MAE General Science. Please allow me to share with you in a few minutes my research work entitled Development and Validation of Self-Learning Module in Science 8. Education is a deliberate course of determination that intends to create a meaningful learning process. Through the education process, the school trains students to develop and realize their abilities and potentials through meaningful learning. In plan of instructions, the goal of every educator is for the learners to meet the target competencies established through the accomplishment of a given task. The National Council of Education, Research and Training asserts that science, in its teaching and learning process, has seen its transition from being teacher-centered to child-centered, from mere classroom explanation to vibrant, interactive, activity-based learning through experimentation and experiential learning. From a worldwide perspective, science education highlights availability, accessibility, acceptability, and adaptability as a crucial part of a student's welfare. Without these dimensions, there can be no quality educations. Innovations and opportunities in education are significant in the midst of current worldwide crisis. As COVID-19 continues to spread around the world in many countries, sustaining destructive and has become the critical challenge for the global education community. Different states implement a range of high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech solutions to ensure continuity of learning. For teachers, the COVID-19 pandemic is an essential, versatile, and transformative test without a pre-configured playbook that can direct fitting reactions. The rate at which COVID-19 spreads has made every sector of human life immediately feel its impact. This encouraged teachers who are frontliners in education to develop materials that is aligned with the reform of science basic education. Along with this problem, the development of module as instructional material is viewed as a crucial step to address the education needs in the country, particularly in response to the new normal brought about by COVID-19 pandemic. Part of this research are the related literatures, are the K-12 Science Education Framework, the Grade 8 Science, the curriculum or the course itself. And then we also have the instructional materials, the independent learning, the outcomes-based education, and modular approach in science teaching. For the theoretical framework, this study anchors on John Dewey's theory of learning by doing, in which effective education generally comes through social interactions in a setting of school that is well thought out as a social institution. Dewey considered education to be a living process, not a preparation for future life. In a learner-centered setting, John Dewey's social learning theory and educational beliefs are evident in the application or practice. Shiro views students are busy at work constructing their familiarity through personal meaning rather than a teacher-centered, imposed knowledge and teacher-directed activities. This study also stands on the Constructivism Theory by Jean Piaget, specifically individual and cognitive constructivism. For the conceptual paradigm, it involves the IPO, uh, a shift. So we have the input, process, and output. For the input, we have the learning competencies in Science 8, content topics to be included in the self-learning module, and then we also have the existing resources or the existing resource materials. The processes involves the designing and developing of self-learning module in Science 8, evaluation of the learning competencies in Science 8 by grade 8 teachers using an evaluation tool from the PSAU co-ed department. And of course, we have the validation of the module by science experts using an evaluation tool also coming from the PSAU co-ed department. And last process, we have the revision of the module. And then the output is a self-learning module in grade 8 science. Statement of the problem. The primary purpose of this research is to develop and validate self-learning module in Science 8. Specifically, the study sought to answer the following questions. Number 1, how may the Science 8 module be developed? And how do experts validate the module in Science 8 in terms of its content, design and format, and pedagogical factor? For the research design, the study utilized research and development design, specifically descriptive evaluative method of research. The respondents are categorized into two groups. First group comprises the 10 grade 8 science teachers who serve as an evaluators of the learning competencies in the self-learning module. These teachers have educational qualification aligned in their teaching specialization and have been teachers of the subject for at least 3 years. And then the second group of respondents comprises 8 experts who validated and developed module. This group includes subject matter experts, science master teachers, and instructional designers. We have two kinds of research instruments, or there are two research instruments that were used in the study. First, we have the evaluation instrument for topics to be included in the DE or DEL modules from the PSAU co-ed department, and then followed by the evaluation rating sheet for DE and ODEL module from the PSAU co-ed or the College of Education. The research procedures involve 3 phases. First, we have the needs assessment, followed by the second phase, the development, and then third phase, we have the validation. Statistical use that was used is the Loshi content validity ratio table was used in the study. For the results and discussion, first we have table 1.1. So phases in the development or phases in module development. So we have this table. So this table shows the phases in the development of self-learning module in Science 8. The first phase is the needs assessment. The researcher examined different resources relevant to the topics covered in Science 8. Also, the learning competencies were determined and the teacher respondents evaluated the said competencies. The second phase is the development. This phase involves the designing and making of the self-learning module based on the evaluation made by the teacher respondents. The results of the evaluation undergone Losch method and the learning competencies to be included in the module were identified. The third phase is validation. This phase involves the validation of the developed module by the experts. This phase also involves in revising of the module based from the module of the experts, or based from the criteria, comments, and suggestion of the experts. Final validation by the experts is also part of this phase. Next, we have table 2.1, which has something to do with a summary of scores of learning competencies per learning content in the first quarter in Science 8. 3 out of 11 listed competencies in the first quarter in Science 8 were considered essential by 10 evaluators, and 2 of them were counted as essential by the 9 validators out of 10. This indicates that 5 out of 11 competencies included in the design of the module in the first quarter. Only the competencies with CVR, or the content validity ratio, values meeting the minimum values of 0.62 to 1.0 were attained and considered essential based on the lost table. Since the total numbers of evaluators were 10, therefore, only those competencies with 9 to 10 evaluators considered them as essential were retained. On the other hand, 6 out of 11 listed as non-essential and were disregarded in the design of the module since the CVR for these competencies had CVR of zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.6. Based on the table, the learning competencies per learning content to be included in the first quarter are the loss of motion, energy, which includes the potential and kinetic energy, how sound travels, electricity, connection, and safety devices. As specified by Hermanto et al. In 2019, one important concept in physics is the Newton's law of motion, which is a basic concept of the motion of objects related to force and mass, making it also important to learn. Students also experience difficulties in understanding the concept of energy as articulated by Park and Louis in 2015. Related to this, in a study conducted by Deborah and Fidelis 2016, sound waves and their application rank highest in level of difficulty of students. Likewise, it has been determined that the students have difficulties in understanding current in electric circuits, tension, and electrical power in electric unit from the study of Sevim and Cesal 2014. The difficulties and essentialities in nature of these topics are some reasons to consider to their inclusion to the content. Next, we have the table 2.2, which summarizes the scores of learning competencies per learning content in the second quarter in Science 8. This table shows the score of the learning content in the second quarter. The summary implies that out of 6 total learning competencies, 5 of them were considered essential, as 9 out of 10 evaluators counted them as essential. All of these competencies have CVR of 0.8. The competencies that have a CVR of less than 0.62 were not included in the design of the module. Based on the table, the learning competencies for learning content to be included in the second quarter are earthquakes, understanding typhoons, other members of the solar system, which includes comets, meteors, and asteroids. Earthquakes and typhoons should be part of the topics to teach in school, according to DepEd, or the Department of Education 2016. It is by the knowledge gained from studying earthquakes and typhoons that the students start understanding their impact on societies and to find ways to mitigate change, according to Mohader and Adam 2010. As a result of being located along the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Philippines is prone to earthquakes, according to Mangahas 2017. Being located outside the Pacific Ocean, the Philippines is prone to typhoons, according to Straub 2019. The concept of comets, meteors, and asteroids should be taught since the terminologies are often confusing, according to Curtin University in 2015. And most lessons in the second quarter were included as they provide emphasis to practical applications. We move on to the table 2.3, which summarizes the score of learning competencies per learning content in the third quarter in Science 8. This table shows that 4 out of 5 learning competencies, they have a CVR of 0.8 to 1.0, as 9 out of 10 evaluators mark them as essential. Following the Losch table, these competencies were included in the design of the module in the third quarter. Only one competency was excluded since it has a CVR of zero point 0.6 or 0.6. Based on the table, the learning competencies per learning content to be included in the third quarter are the particulate nature of matter, physical and chemical change, and subatomic particles. According to Adadan, Trundle, and Irving 2011, particulate nature of matter is one of the subjects on which learners have maximum number of misconceptions. Therefore, atom, concept, and properties of this should be constructed accurately in the minds of the student so as to facilitate the learning of other concepts, according to Arzu, Fatma, and Nesvat in 2016. Furthermore, it was stated by Gulam and Nyberg 2015 that understanding how to differentiate between chemical and physical change is an essential skill that secondary school students must acquire. On the other hand, Netzel 2014 articulated that the abstract microscopic world of atoms cannot be seen with the naked eye, and models are therefore necessary and crucial educational tools for teaching atomic concepts in school. Learning contents in the third quarter marked as essential involves abstract concepts in their discussions. Next, we have table 2.4, summary of scores of learning competencies per learning content in the fourth quarter in Science 8. As shown in the table, 8 out of 11 competencies were considered as essential by participant evaluators and were included in the development of module as they met the needed CVR of 0.62 to 1.0. 3 competencies were excluded. Only 8 out of 10 evaluators considered them as essential. Based on the table, the learning competencies per learning contents should be included in the fourth quarters are the digestive system, cell division, Mendelian genetics, classification of organisms, biodiversity, transfer of energy in ecosystem, biogeochemical cycles, and human negative impact in the environment. It was indicated that Abru et al. In 2014, the digestion is a complex topic that involves different organs in several biogeochemical reactions. Moreover, they emphasize the knowledge about digestive system is demanded on biology disciplines and important to understand human body functioning. Williams et al. In 2011, on the other hand, claimed that students have the difficulty in delineating connections between concepts of cell division, such as mitosis and meiosis, which are crucial yet distinct processes linked to the passage of genetic information. Related to this, despite Mendelian genetics continues to be among the most commonly taught concepts in biology, yet students often have misconception about inheritance, according to Williams and Raj in 2015. When it comes to classifying organisms, Kennedy 2014 emphasized that this system is important to learn, as it is impossible to study every living organisms from an individual level. Therefore, classification is necessary to facilitate easy study of organisms. Furthermore, biological classifications are the cornerstones of ordering and understanding biodiversity. That is an essential application of it, according to Struzzi 2019. In studying ecology, energy flows in the ecosystem should be understood in order to know how the solar energy captured by plants flows through different organisms in an ecosystem, since all organisms are dependent from their food on producers, either directly or indirectly. Moreover, according to Becca, 2017, high school students usually know how water cycle only but struggling in learning with carbon and nitrogen, making biogeochemical cycle change necessity to elaborate. Likewise, human negative impact in the environment should be incorporated in lessons to ecology since there is still lack of awareness to biodiversity loss according to Tidball in 2012. Next, we have the second part, which is the design and development of self-learning module in Science 8. Based on the identified learning competencies, upon the evaluation of the teacher respondents, the content, learning activities, and assessment methods were designed to attain in each module a target competency. The total number of modules developed is based on the number of essential competencies. The researcher gave attention in the need of the students to learn and selected topics and attain the learning objectives in the distance learning setup due to pandemic. Moreover, the simplicity of concepts discussed and illustrations provided were taken into consideration for easy learning and understanding of complex topics. For each competency, one module was designed and developed. Therefore, the researcher came up with 21 modules, 5 in the first quarter, 5 in the second quarter, 3 in the third quarter, and 8 in the fourth quarter. Parts of the self-learning module. The self-learning module is composed of 15 parts. First, we have the overview, the learning competency, the content, the objectives, the values, pre-tests, the discussion, unit recap, the post-test, progress check, the assignment, experiments, the links, the answer key, and references. So these are the parts of the learning module, the self-learning module in Science 8. Next, we have the third part, which is the validation of the module or the developed self-learning module in Science 8. An evaluation rating sheet for modules from the PSAU College of Education serve as their tool in validating the developed module. Answerable by yes or no, the module was carefully validated or evaluated using criteria and different factors, which includes the content, the design and format, and pedagogical factor. The evaluating rating sheets with response from each expert validators have been collected and consolidated for data analysis. The comments, suggestions, and recommendations of the expert validators were taken into considerations and serve as guidelines in the revision of the developed module. The following table shows the validation of the 8 science experts. So we have the first table, table 3.1, the content validation. So table 3.1 is the validation of the self-learning modules as to content. It is shown that upon the first validation, the 8 validators agreed that the self-learning module has touched the items 1.1, 1.2, and 1.4. However, 2 out of 8 validators did not agree on the adequacy of information being provided in every lesson with links and references to guide students for further research activities. To address such disagreement, the researcher provided additional information and suggested reading materials in the module to enhance students' skills. Furthermore, one of the validators did not agree with the accuracy of knowledge and ideas being presented in every unit upon the first validation. To make improvements, some details in the discussion part of the module evaluated, which embodies the details and information of the lesson, were revised and changed to the reference material suggested by the validator. Upon revision and improvement to meet the unmet items, the revised module has met the standard of items 1.3 and 1.5, with all the validators positively responding to the item with a second validation. As such, it can be said that the self-learning module contains accurate and adequate information necessary for learning factual knowledge and lead in addressing the gap of the information through research as part of scientific skills. According to expert validators, the module is relevant, that is tailored to the needs of the learners, and the complete parts of the module highlights the resilient point of the module. The crafting of self-learning modules, which can be independently used by students for distance learning even during pandemic. Content is concise and clear. There is a limit on the amount of information, focusing and self-sufficient on a particular lesson, engaging learners in a shorter but meaningful learning. It was determined in overall validation that the self-learning module design has fulfilled all the standards in terms of its content. Table 3.2, the design format validation. Table 3.2 shows the validation of the self-learning module as to format and design. It is indicated that upon the first validation, the first learning module satisfied all the items except for item 2.3. One of the validators believe that the module lacks graphics that are motivating and very relevant to the topics presented. To address the lacking feature, the researcher created a design to make the modules visually enticing and presentable. In the second validation, all of the 8 validators agreed that the module has satisfied the standards of item 2.3. With such result, it can be said that the self-learning modules was in logical format, appropriate design, and sequenced properly. Moreover, it contains the needed elements such as enticing graphics, pictures, right textual and non-textual elements. According to expert validators, the illustrations are appropriate to the concept, the module is user-friendly, topics and lessons are arranged from simple to complex that make them easy to understand, and the most essential parts of the module are included. It was revealed in the overall validation of the self-learning module that it met all the standards in terms of appropriateness of its design and format. Table 3.3, the pedagogical validation. The table illustrates the results of the validation of self-learning module in terms of pedagogy. All of the validators agreed that the self-learning module met the items 4.1 and 4.6 upon initial validation. For items 4.3, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and 4.7, one validator disagrees. The result of the first validation suggests that the module should be improved in terms of its assessment of the prior knowledge, employment of cognitive and motivational learning strategies, relevance and alignment of the activities with the learning objectives and feasibility of the lessons, and presents good feedback mechanism for formative assessment. For items 4.5, 3 out of 8 validators decided to disagree. This implies that the module is needed to be improved in terms of its provision for individual differences to support diverse learners. In order for the module to meet the requirements for item 4.2, pre-assessment questions were improved and revised to bridge the gap between what they already know and what they have to know. Additionally, the real-life applications of the lessons and integration of the lesson to interesting facts were done to satisfy the pedagogical standards for item 4.3. To meet the standards for item 4.4, procedures in the activities and experiments were modified and simplified. Alternative materials which are easily found at home were suggested in place of other materials, and more examples were provided. Activities were made differentiated to satisfy the standards for items 4.5. Lastly, To improve the module and meet the requirements of item 4.7, questions and follow-up activities were placed to certain parts of the modules so they can regularly receive formative feedback on learning, track their performance, monitor their improvement, and test their knowledge. Upon revision and improvement to satisfy the items before with disagreement, the second validation shows that all the items were satisfied in terms of the pedagogy of the module. It indicates that all revisions and modifications have been effective to standardize the module's pedagogical features in all domains of validation. According to expert validator, the learning competencies are presented in the module to keep track of the lessons on how to meet and achieve them. Furthermore, the competencies provide directions for what the lessons are intended for. The language used is suitable for the learners. The introduction of the lessons keeps the learner guided on what the lesson is all about. Teacher provides a good discussion of the lesson and a logical manner in doing so. The module is realistically presented for ease of use by the learner. Positively, this mechanism makes the student motivated to learn more about the lesson. Significantly, the modules are a good source of learning on how science is taught in a modular way. It was determined in the overall validation of the self-learning module in Science 8 has fulfilled all the standards in terms of its pedagogy. For the conclusion, the DE module in Science 8 was developed through a systematic, well-planned, and scientific process. The learning competencies treated as essential by science experts were included in the design. Each DE module has corresponding parts or section to help in the attainment of learning competencies. The 8 experts in science teaching and curriculum instruction who participated in the validation of the developed printed DE module. The said materials have been validated and accepted by the panel of validators in terms of content, design, and format, and pedagogical factors. For the recommendations, the following recommendations were drawn based from the conclusions. First, the developed material may be part of blended learning in a distant learning modality, which is being adopted due to COVID-19 pandemic. It may be used as basis for developing the same material to other grade levels of science in junior and senior high school, and even to other disciplines. And lastly, the study can be replicated by other researchers by designing and developing DE modules while other disciplines of learning are integrated and differentiated activities are observed. And that's all about the research entitled Development and Validation of Self-Learning Module in Science 8. Once again, I'm Ken, MAED General Science, under the MAED General Science program. Thank you and have a great day, my dear panelists.